Kia ora, everyone, and welcome to COVID Chat with me, Dr. Siouxsie Wiles. Don't like the name? Then make a suggestion for another one. So I'm Dr. Siouxsie Wiles. I'm a microbiologist and associate professor at the University of Auckland. And we are going to be taking this opportunity maybe every Monday, Wednesday, Friday to talk about some of the science behind COVID-19 and answer your questions. So happy to take suggestions for another name if you think there's something better. And what I will also point out is that I don't work for the Ministry of Health or anything like that. So no questions about those kinds of things, please. So I'm joining you today from day 6 of lockdown, in New Zealand. And before we get an update on things, let me introduce you to Damien Christie, who's the brains behind this crazy idea. Damien.
I don't know about that, Siouxsie. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so the idea here is there's a lot of information coming out. It's really great that the government, I think, is being so proactive. We've got these daily briefings from the ministry, from the police, from anyone, the Prime Minister, anyone that's got something to say. But we thought it's important to have a focus here on the science. So really happy to take your questions. We'll be taking your questions to nzcovid@gmail.com, nzcovid@gmail.com. They're on the screen. Nice work, Ben. And we'll be answering them later in the show. The idea is that each day we'll be discussing a different topic in depth, and then we'll get to your questions, because I know there are so many questions out there, so many rumors, so much misinformation. So we thought it'd be good to have a science-focused chat. And thanks very much to the Science Media Centre too for supporting us to make this happen in these trying times. Siouxsie, shall we start off by having a look at the latest figures?
Let's do that. Yeah, so we'll start with New Zealand. And here's our increase in cases. We're now at 708 cases. That's confirmed and probable cases here in New Zealand. And if we look at how that's changed on a daily basis in the next graph. So we've had 61 new cases announced today. And so it looks like this is a bit of a sort of steady case numbers at the moment. I think we still need to wait and see whether we are stabilizing and whether we're going to start to drop soon. But we're really pleased to not see it growing exponentially, I guess. If we have a look at what's happening around the world at the moment, you can see that there are a phenomenal number of cases, so nearly up to 900,000 cases confirmed. And as I've said before, remember that these numbers will likely be a huge underestimate of the number of actual cases, because some countries aren't testing at all, or have very limited access to tests, or are testing only people in hospital. 42,000 deaths, which is a very sad thing. But so if we start with today's topic, what I wanted to talk to you about today was testing, because I see there's a lot of questions about that, but also you might have heard of a new quick 15-minute test. And so I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about that and why some countries might be introducing it and why some countries might not be. So the very first test, and I guess the gold standard test for COVID-19 is looking for the actual virus itself. And so this looks for the genetic material of the virus, generally in swabs taken from right at the back of the nose, but also sometimes in samples taken from the lungs of people. And so then you have to take the sample, it has to get sent to a lab, and then that lab has to then do a series of different steps. So the first is to extract the genetic material of the virus, which is RNA, and then run a test which basically looks for very specific sequences that are specific to this particular coronavirus, and then basically amplifies that using a reaction called PCR that makes millions and millions of copies of it that can then be visualized. And so this basically shows you that the virus is there. And is the specific virus, the specific coronavirus. And so some people have tested negative and then tested positive if there wasn't quite enough virus to be detected by the test. And people, I guess, will only test positive while there is actually virus there to be detected. And so some people have tested positive for quite a while after their symptoms have gone, and that's been especially in poo samples. So it's known that some people will be excreting this virus in their poo. But what the test doesn't tell us is whether that virus is viable. So it's looking for genetic material, but not necessarily viable virus. And so that's why we actually don't know whether, if somebody is excreting it in their poo, whether that is actually an important way that this virus might transmit, and it's thought it isn't. So that's the gold standard test. But these new fast tests that some countries are bringing in are something quite different. So they are not a test for the virus themselves, but are a test for our immune response to the virus. So they're called seroassays, and they basically take a blood sample from somebody and then look for antibodies, which is these amazing kind of immune molecules that our body make in response to infection. So these assays are fantastic at showing whether somebody has responded, that somebody's body has responded to the virus. But the really important thing about them is that timing matters. So these tests have come online because doctors have been able to take blood samples from patients with COVID-19 and have a look at what their antibody responses have been. And what those studies showed is that people produce an antibody called IgM, which is made around about 5 to 7 days after infection, and then another one called IgG at around 14 days after infection. The really important thing that those studies both showed, though, was that not everybody made antibodies. So what has been done now with these new tests in terms of validating them, I guess that's a better word, has been to take samples that were from people that were known to be positive for this coronavirus, and then taking blood from those people and checking them for this sero assay, so looking for antibodies. And quite a lot of samples turn out to be positive for virus, but negative in this blood assay. So they were perhaps the blood was taken too early, and then people hadn't made those antibodies yet. So this is what's really important about these assays. That's not everybody will make these things, and when the blood is taken is really, really important. So our chief science advisor has had some experts look at this, and here in New Zealand, they will not be rolled out as an alternative to the nasal swabs, because a negative result is not necessarily a negative result. So some people can be shedding the virus, can be infectious, but still have a negative blood result. So it's going to be interesting to see how other countries use these. I think one of the ways is to be thinking that if people have had the virus, then they will test positive on this test, and then that means they could go back to work, say. But it doesn't tell you anything about whether those people are still infectious or anything like that. So those are the tests. I just wanted to make sure that you knew about them. There might be some faster genetic tests coming online. I've seen mention of them, but no actual data yet. So I'll keep you updated on those. Right, so that's kind of testing. Shall we, Damien, do you want to let us know what questions we have?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been getting heaps of questions in. Thanks, Siouxsie. Again, if you want to send us your questions, you've got a few options. You can either comment on the Facebook page if you're watching on Facebook. You can comment on the YouTube page if you're watching on YouTube, or you can send us your questions to nzcovid@gmail.com, nzcovid@gmail.com. So we wanted to know, we've got heaps of questions. We're going to try and get through as many as we can, but we aren't going anywhere. We will have plenty of days to answer these questions. We will try and get to them all, but keep them coming as well. We have been receiving a lot of questions, Siouxsie, about masks. So we're going to do a deep dive like you did just before on testing on masks on Friday. There's a lot of misinformation out there. People want to know how to make their own masks. We will be talking about that on Friday. So we'll hold off on any of those questions today. First question, though, Katrina wants to know, do we need to clean frozen items that we bring back from the supermarket? Can the virus survive freezing?
Gosh, so I guess nothing really is known about this virus yet in terms of freezing. I haven't been able to find any papers, but I have looked in general at coronaviruses, and yes, they can survive in the freezer. I guess the question here is, what is the likelihood that there will be coronavirus on items from the freezer? And the chance of that is very, very, very low. So again, the really important things are just around washing your hands after you've handled anything that might have been handled by other people.
Okay. a related question, and you sort of answered this one anyway. Shelley, her son works at Pack and Save. He's only got one uniform. It's a woolen uniform. He can't wash it in between shifts to kill the virus. She was wondering whether she could chuck it in the freezer overnight to freeze out the virus. We've heard that won't work, but maybe Pack and Save should give him another uniform. But should he be worried about bringing home the virus on a uniform like that?
Again, chances will be very low. So if he's really worried, he can get changed and put the uniform kind of aside, maybe in a bag or something, and then sort of wash his hands and everything, and then basically go back and wear that one. And as long as he makes sure that he washes his hands regularly, he should be absolutely fine.
Okay, great. Bryony wants to know, how long does the virus show up in your current testing? She was sick a few weeks ago, but didn't get tested or couldn't get tested because she didn't fit the criteria. Her symptoms have eventually sort of gone up and down, and they tested her 3 weeks later. Is it possible that the results will be negative because she's recovered? I suppose it depends, as you said, on which test you use, right?
Yeah, so in New Zealand, the test that will be used at the moment is the DNA test, sorry, the genetic test. And so that one, if there is no virus there, then that would come up negative. Yeah. So I guess it will be best to wait and see if these blood tests come online at some point, and then they will just tell you whether you have been exposed and your body has mounted an immune response. But not everybody's body will test positive in those tests.
Do we know how long the tail is on this virus? Like once your symptoms, once you're better, does that mean the virus is entirely gone, or will some of it stick around and show up in a test?
So again, it depends on the sample, and as I say, some people have tested positive with their in their poo for several weeks afterwards. I'm not aware of many tests that said that they were positive for a long time after by nasal swabs. So yeah, it will kind of depend on. I mean, we would expect once your body has mounted an immune response and cleared the infection, then that you certainly would be testing negative, at least in your nose.
Joe wants to know, her partner's a builder who's doing some essential work at the local supermarket outside the front entrance. They've taped it off, but sometimes customers come into their bubble within a metre of them. How concerned should he be or should she be?
Again, if you're not having close contact for, a period of time with somebody, then I wouldn't be too concerned about that. But the onus is on all of us. No way should people be going to the supermarket if they are feeling unwell. So, if you have any symptoms at all, you should not be going outside at all, because you may well, if you cough on somebody, put them at risk. So, yeah, but he should be absolutely fine.
Question just in from Ben on the Facebooks. Does the testing actually isolate COVID-19, or is it just picking up all coronaviruses? There are stories going around that the testing isn't actually that accurate.
Oh, that's a great question. So, the test actually tests for a range of coronaviruses and possibly SARS as well. So, which is a coronavirus, but it does test specifically for this one. So, yeah, the test has been evolving since it was first developed a couple of months ago. It's been getting better and better. So, it definitely picks up specifically this one as well as a few others.
Right. So I suppose the thing is, if you had SARS, the old SARS, and it showed that, then that would be a whole different concern rather than the new one.
Yeah. Yeah, and so my understanding is that it looks for all of them, but you'll get an answer as to which one was basically.
Oh, okay, right. Good. Clear. Now, here's a question I've had from a bunch of people, and especially there's been a lot of talk on Twitter about this one. People who are animal lovers are really missing the ability to walk down the street and pet the neighborhood animals. Lisa wants to know, she's read about pets and whether they can be possible carriers. She says, my dogs are fine, but I'm trying to keep my cat away from the wandering hands of the oldies up the road. And she's finding that challenging.
Yeah, so we would treat cats and dogs essentially as other items in the house that could be sneezed on, right? So this is about whether we have got the virus and we're sneezing on the animals, and they could potentially have virus on their fur. And then if you pet them, you can pick it up. So again, it's just like the washing hands is the most important thing. I mean, it's why we're advising people to keep their pets with them. If you take your dogs out, keep them on a lead and keep them away from other people, and why we're advising other people to not pet other people's animals. But you have to remember that the chance of picking up an infection this way would be very low. So it's a risk, and it's a risk that a low risk. But for those people who would be particularly vulnerable to infection, those are the ones that would more be cautious. So I would hope that the old ladies are not petting the cats, but your pets are probably fine. And again, just regularly wash your hands.
I've been getting stories that my cat has been seen across the road, up the road, next door neighbours over the road, and so forth. So I'm actually getting quite worried about my cats being a vector. Amanda asks, this will be our last question for the day. Amanda wants to know, how will the lag in testing time, she said it took her a week to get the results back, affect our ability to understand the extent of the outbreak in New Zealand?
Well, I would hope that that was a bit of an anomaly. It might be dependent on where she was and how long it took the swab to get where it needed the disease. And the understanding now is that the turnaround time is quite fast. And it has to be, because what if a test is positive, and you have to remember that the majority of the tests done in New Zealand have been negative. But if the test is positive, then the faster that people can get on with that contact tracing and find out who that person had been in contact with, so who else might be at risk of having coronavirus, COVID-19, is what's really important. So I would hope that that has been resolved now.
Excellent. Well, look, that's all the questions we're going to get through today. Thank you, Siouxsie, for hosting this once again, for making yourself available in these very difficult and busy for you times. If anyone has questions, we'll be back on Friday. We'll be talking about masks, nzcovid@gmail.com. I want to say thank you again to the Science Media Centre for making this happen and helping us to keep the lights on while we're making this show. And I thought I'd leave us, Siouxsie, we've got to have a little bit of a laugh sometimes, with a clip I found sort of lying around the internet on maybe an overreaction on what you do when you come home from the groceries. See you on Friday, Siouxsie.
Yeah, see you on Friday. Thanks a lot, everybody.